Good morning, guys. By the time this actually gets uploaded, it might be the afternoon. I've had a little difficulties with some of my videoing this morning, but nonetheless, it'll be there, and then it'll be another issue I know in the future to be able to be more prepared for. So today is day 8, and you all should be factoring polynomials today. So on Friday, day 7, you finished up the lesson of factoring a GCF out of a polynomial, and today we're just going to jump into factoring polynomials into two binomials. So I have two things on my desk that I'll be referring to that hopefully you have as well. I have my textbook. We're in section 7.5. It begins on page 386. And I have my electronic notes brought up on my computer. So I'll mostly be referring to your notes, but on this page number in your textbook, if you need extra examples, that would be a very good spot for you to look at. I will also let you know that at my house it is super windy today, so I apologize if you hear any of that. If it makes it difficult for you to hear me, just message me and let me know, and I can try this another time. So let's jump right into it. When I'm looking at my notes, we're talking about factoring a polynomial from a particular form. So in the start of your notes, it more specifically gives this form. And the reason it gives this form is because we have some placeholders. B and C are variables for some sort of coefficient or constant that would be present in this polynomial. Also, I want you to notice there is not a letter currently in front of x squared, because that's going to be your lesson for day 9 if you have yet to look into that. So eventually we'll build up to how to factor something such as this, but today we're not really going to look at that. All right, now I want you to consider the fact that you all have been dealing with polynomials like this since 7.1, and the past, I believe you had 2 sections or 2 days of work where we created polynomials by multiplying binomials. So let's consider if I had these 2 binomials and I asked you to multiply them, we know that I would have x times x, which produces x squared. Then I would have 2x. Then I would have 4x. And then I would have 8. I would combine like terms and have x squared plus 6x plus 8. All right, so this piece of information, whereas it was important for us to get this last line, it's not important for what I'm going to be talking about. All right, so we can all see that this polynomial is very similar to the form up top. All right, so I don't have a coefficient in front of x squared. I do have a number in the place of b. I also have a number in the place of c. And this was created because I took this binomial x plus 4 and I multiplied it by x plus 2, therefore producing the product x squared plus 6x plus 8. So in this section, you all will start with a polynomial such as this, and you'll figure out the 2 binomials that were multiplied to create the given polynomial. So in your notes, there's some information that I had you to look at concerning how B would be created and how C would be created. So let me rewrite this information one more time. I believe 2x was actually first, so let me try that again. All right, so I'm going to take my 6 and my 8, change their color so things stick out a little bit better for you, so this hopefully clicks pretty quickly. All right, so in your notes, and my computer decided to close for a second. All right, in your notes, I asked question 1, let's consider that if there were a number here, it would be created using multiplication because 1x times 1x produces 1x squared. All right, so this number is a product. Then I'm going to skip over to C. We know that 8 was created because 4 and 2 multiplied. Therefore, this number is a product of 2 given numbers. And then finally, 6 wasn't created, therefore B was not created until after some numbers were multiplied, creating these products, and then we added some numbers together. Therefore, 6, or B, is a sum of given numbers. Are we all on the same track down? All right, so in your notes, you should be on the first page about halfway down, and I'm going to start looking at the table about what's called factors. So that table lets me take information from the product of C and the sum of B to figure out these two these two binomials that created the polynomial. So in the chart, I ask that you factor out C because the factors of C, we want to test to see which of those factors would, 1, be able to create this 8, but also be able to add together to create what is B. All right, so let's give that a try. We already know that the answer to this polynomial is x plus 4 times x plus 2. So let me write this up here in the corner. Kind of like a placeholder. That way I don't forget what we were working with. All right, now this chart is only going to work for when I don't have an a here, meaning I don't have a coefficient in front of x squared. So we want to figure out all of the factors of C, and then we're going to add them together. So we're going to create a sum of the factors and ask ourselves, is that what our value of B is? All right, so let's give this a shot. We know that in this case, C again is 8. Okay, so C is 8, and I want to know all of the factors of 8. So that could be 1 and 8, that could be 2 and 4, and then if I really wanted to get fancy with it, I could start transposing them, meaning I could say 8 and 1, 4 and 2, but again, in this case, because I don't have an A here, that's not very relevant. All right, so let's go ahead and say all of our factors are 1 and 8, 2 times 4, and that's it. Now we're going to add those factors together and see if, when we add them together, if it happens to be what we have as B. So my B is 6. So our goal is to be able to add these together and end up getting to 6. So I have 1 plus 8, which produces 9. I have 2 plus 4, which produces 6. And I've already gone through all my factors. Now again, our goal was to see which of those factors would get me to B, because that's a sum. My B is 6, so 9, that's not right, but 6 is. So how do I use this chart to create my binomials? Well, these factors can produce 8. Added together, they can produce 6. So how I build my my binomials from that is I know that I have to have two binomials, and that's a little small, so let me try that again. Give myself a little bit more room. Nothing you guys aren't used to from the classroom, right? So I want to factor out this polynomial. So I know I have to have a variable plus or minus a number, a variable plus or minus a number. These are those two numbers that close out or end the binomials. So I would have a 2 and I would have a 4. I also have a positive 2, therefore plus 2, and I have a positive 4, therefore plus 4. And then the last part that's going to close out those binomials is I have to have a variable here. So look to see which variable you started with. So x squared is the same as saying I have x times x, therefore you have x and you have x. All right, so I know that has a lot of moving pieces to consider, but we factored this out primarily because we factored out C. We figured out which of those factors would add up to create B, and then we broke those factors into our binomials and considered the same variable for the front or the first terms of our binomials. All right, so I hope that was helpful. All right, so let me give you a little bit more information. So in your notes, you're going to see where I start talking about, well, what about if C is positive or negative, or B is positive or negative? And you should be looking at a chart at this point in time. So give me 1 minute so I can also show you that chart at the same time and explain what in the world it's talking about. All right, I'm back. So when we left off, I was talking about how the sign of C and B affect your factors. So you have a chart, and I wanted to show this to you even though it should be in front of you, but my camera does not reverse how it needs to. So make sure you're looking at the chart where it says when C is positive, such as this, now consider when C is negative, so on and so forth. So I'm not going to write out everything for that chart. Your notes goes in much more detail. I'm going to say a lot of what it says though. So when you have a positive C, I want you to consider again that C is created because two numbers have multiplied, therefore creating C. So if I have a positive C, there are two ways this could happen. I could have had a positive times a positive, or I could have had a negative times a negative, because we know a positive times a positive produces a positive. We also know a negative times a negative produces a positive again. Now, let's think about how these would affect B. So when we broke up the previous problem, we knew that the factors would then add together to create B. So let me take this a step back. Instead of doing this, I'm going to show you a little differently. So I'm going to add these two pieces together. So I have a positive plus a positive, therefore I have a positive B. But if I have a negative times a negative, which produces a positive C, I actually have a negative B. So far, so good? So when you all have your setup of your polynomial, this setup, or these two setups rather, I keep erasing something that I need there. Sorry about that, guys. So this could have x plus bx minus, I've just messed everything up. All right, so let me show you this chart that I'm referring to. Now mine's going to look slightly different than yours, no big deal. So we've already discussed that C is created because two numbers have multiplied to create that number. So let's look at positive C first. If I have a positive C and I break that down into its two factors, then I know that a positive times a positive creates a positive. So this could be positive times positive. But I also know that a negative times a negative produces a positive. So my two factors could be negative, creating that positive C. Now, the next thing I want you to think about is how we took those factors and we added them together to create whatever our coefficient B was. So if I had a positive plus a positive, then B would be positive. So this would be a positive B. However, if I had a negative plus a negative, I would actually have a negative B. So far, so good. Great. So these setups would look one of two ways. So if I had a positive C and then both of my factors were positive, I would have x squared plus a positive bx plus c. However, if I had two negative factors leading to a negative b, I would have x squared minus bx plus c as well. So again, I had positive c both times, but depending on those factors, I know I'm going to either have a positive set of factors or a negative set of factors. All right, now let's look at when I have a negative c. So if I have a negative c, this is where I might have to do a little trial and error here and there. So a negative c could be produced because I have a positive times a negative, but it can also mean I have a negative times a positive, which essentially means the same exact thing for those of you that remember the distributive property, excuse me. So I multiply these together. Oh, and it seems like Ollie wants to talk to you guys. All right, so I multiplied those together. And no matter what, I have a negative b. So in your chart in your notes, I didn't really give you a setup for, well, if you have a negative, you're always going to have this type of b, because it really just depends on the factors. So if I add these together, it just depends whichever factor is bigger, if C really is going to be positive or negative. So let me fix my error here. I'm sorry. The dog distracted me a little bit. So if it happened to be, let's say, a positive 14 and then a negative 10, we know that it would be positive 4. But if that was opposite and I had a positive, there's Ollie again, a positive 10 and a negative 14, this would be negative 4. All right, I'm going to try to wrap this up quickly because he's getting a little crazy, as you can tell. All right, so this part right here, I cannot say for certain what B would be. However, what I do know is that my C is going to be negative. This part right here is either positive or negative depending on the setup of those factors. So you could very easily break down your factors. You just have to play around with the positives and negatives here. So that would just be a matter of, maybe you had a -4 here. You would want to factor that out by saying, well, I know 1 and 4, and I know 2 and 2, and then just kind of throw, maybe this one's negative, see if that creates B, or maybe the factor of 4 is negative and see if that creates B, so on and so forth. So again, unfortunately, we do have a little bit of trial and error when it comes to that C being negative. All right, so at this point, that leads me to, that leads me to your assignment. So you should be looking at what's called the factoring trinomials match up. And you're gonna cut out those pieces to factor out the polynomials on the other page. So cut those out and then either glue or tape them into the right spots. And hopefully you have a buddy that you can buddy check with. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me any of the numerous ways that you know you can reach out to me. I hope you all are doing well. I miss seeing you, and hopefully we'll see each other soon. Bye.